Hey there, I'm Philip Molina, and this is a breakdown of Walking Dead Season 6, Episode 6, Always Accountable. And this was another one of those sideways stories that's kind of adjacent to the main story of Alexandria, and the writer of this episode packed it full of references. So get ready for like a really in-depth analysis of the story, the characters and imagery, also a few moments that you might have missed, and obviously there are going to be spoilers for the episode ahead, but there'll also be some teeny tiny ones from the comics. They don't really give anything away, they're just kind of showing where we're kind of headed, but let's get right into it. First up, as always, let's take a look at the opening images of the episode. We are once again dropped back into this very long day that all of our characters are experiencing in their own way, but this time it's Abraham, Sasha, and Daryl and their efforts to lead the herd 20 miles away from Alexandria. Now take note of this view behind them, the dreaded wall of walkers. It's ever so slowly following, but it's always there with seemingly no end in sight, and we will definitely come back to that. So moments after the group is attacked and they split up, Daryl wipes out, and we see what's an easily missable moment here, when the camera pulls back and it shows another motorcyclist who appears to have suffered some bad luck also, and the positioning of Daryl alongside that body is clearly intentional. This moment's actually setting up Daryl's entire character arc for the episode, but I'll get back to that when we're closer to the end of the story. Then after Daryl gets taken by a roaming group of runaways, it's kind of hard to catch what they're saying as Daryl comes in and out of consciousness, but there's this easily missable exchange right here referring to Daryl's crossbow. Yeah. Now this moment foreshadows not only the events at the end of the episode when they take Daryl's crossbow away from him again, but it's actually setting up who this guy really is. And I'm not going to go too deep into spoiler territory here, but let's just say this guy has already been confirmed as being Dwight. He's a man who becomes very influential to the plot and whose signature weapon is, you guessed it, a crossbow. Let's keep going. So while the runaways search for someone named Patty, Daryl and Dwight have a little bit of a debate about whether or not trusting people is stupid.
Y'all don't think you're being stupid right now?
And then Daryl manages to escape for a moment, only to be attacked by a pretty awesome looking walker. He's totally covered in moss, and he's actually a reference to the work of Bernie Wrightson, who is the co-creator of Swamp Thing. Though I think it looks a little bit more like Zombie Groot, which idea for next year's Halloween costume. And then when Daryl sees that he's accidentally taken a cooler full of insulin that the runaways had saved for that little type Tina diabetes girl, he realizes he has to get it back to them. And this is a great example of just how far Daryl has come since his beginnings on the show. And the show wanted to subtly remind us of this journey with a very missable detail just a few seconds before this shot. So you see that flower? That is a Cherokee rose, which happens to be the title of an episode from way back in season 2 of the show. It was the endless search for Sophia days. And here's Daryl himself explaining what it means.
The Cherokee rose. When American soldiers were moving Indians off their land, the Cherokee mothers were crying so much because they were losing their little ones along the way. The next day, this rose started to grow right where the mother's tears fell. Give them strength, hope.
Since that was the first moment where we see Daryl really caring about the welfare of others, not just Sophia, but Carol too, this reference here is meant to show just how far on this journey he's come. Type Tina diabetes is a complete stranger, and yet he can't bring himself to not care about her. So Daryl's really come a long way. Then we switch over to the other story of the episode, Sasha and Abraham. Despite what he's used to, we see that Sasha's actually the one running the show here, which makes sense because Abraham is obviously out of his mind these days, and Sasha's actually got some good sense about her right now.
Best way to find a tracker is to stay put. Let him find you.
In fact, there are some missables right here that I think show just how legit Sasha's become. Did you notice that after she points out that they need to wait for Daryl to come back to them, she not only marks up a door with his last name, which is very clever because Dixon on a door isn't going to attract attention from anyone who isn't Daryl, but also a moment earlier, she stomps her boot in the mud to make sure Daryl's got a way to see where they went. So yeah, Sasha's definitely gotten her shit together. So the two decide to lay low inside of this office while they wait for Daryl to find them, and kind of like how Daryl saw a different version of himself in the motorcyclist earlier, Abraham has his own mirror moment as our resident soldier guy happens to stumble upon what appears to be an officer's uniform. And note how Abraham examines the photograph of this man's life in this uniform with his whole family. So this is a really good moment to explain what the hell these two characters are talking about in this scene. They've got all these metaphors and playing chicken with the ground and the shit hitting the fan stuff. So what it all means. Sasha's pointing out that Abraham is very very clearly throwing himself very recklessly into danger as often as possible. And she knows why he's doing this. He thinks if he's always in constant danger, he can't be held responsible for the actions he takes or the stupid decisions that he makes. Kind of like how in the season premiere, he jumped out of a moving car without any good reason. But why is he making all these stupid choices? It's to avoid having to decide whether or not he wants to live. You see, when they got to Alexandria, which remember in the timeline of this show was actually very recent, they were finally off the road. They actually were in a community and it had walls and it's relatively free from danger. And that scares the crap out of Abraham. If he's not out there fighting walkers or people or just being distracted, then he has to sit there and decide, does he want to start a new life? Does he want to imagine living maybe more than just another week? Does he want to fall in love or start a family? Now, these are really tough questions for any character to ask themselves in this world, but it's really easy to forget why they're extra hard for Abraham. You gotta remember, he had a family, like before all this went down. About a year ago, we learned that his family survived the initial outbreak and they held up in a grocery store, but then some of the other survivors raped his wife and he killed all of these men with a freaking soup can, and it scared his family so much that they ran off to be away from him. So when he went looking for them, they were, of course, dead. So that's what Abraham sees in this photograph. Not only his old life with his family and that pain, but the question of starting a new family and the possibility of having a normal life in Alexandria. That's all being forced to the surface for him when he looks at that. And I think that's why Abraham and Sasha are trapped in such a mundane setting. This is a freaking car insurance office. You can't really pretend this shit is hitting the fan while you're surrounded by file boxes and auto insurance policies. In fact, the show goes even a step further to make it clear that the walker threat is at this moment contained, and even though Abraham's like begging to deal with that, he can't. He's finally got to deal with the normal, everyday life stuff. Now, before we jump back to Daryl's story, there's another missable detail here that is worth pointing out. That walker that's trapped behind that glass, they gave us a lot of clues as to what happened to that guy. He likely suffered a bite, tried to treat his injury with the available first aid stuff, and then realizing that he had no way to survive this, he provided the only few services he could think of. One, he leaves a message of encouragement. Two, he provides a little bit of information about the bites being fatal. And three, he locks himself in the office so he can't hurt anyone.
It's locked. We're fine.
And I really love how much work they put into the backstory of these walkers sometimes. Great job on that. Jumping back to Daryl's story, he forces Dwight to trade his little whittled piece of wood in exchange for the insulin, both because he's still very annoyed with how they, bashed his head and kidnapped him and shot at him, but I think he also wants to abide by some sort of code, like the laws of bartering or something. A few times these runaways have made it a point to say they
earned what we took.
And by that logic, Daryl's going by their code of having them earn the insulin back by giving him something. Side note, I love how Daryl has like no interest in hearing a long story about Dwight's grandpa.
What was that thing you're carving?
Grandfather taught me.
Don't care. It'll do.
Like, I wish other characters would use that on this show whenever somebody's being totally boring. Back on the farm, we don't care, shut up. Oh, I kind of miss Herschel now. So moments later, the people that these people ran away from, and presumably the same people that were shooting at our friends in the beginning of the episode, they've tracked them down, and the man standing there is Wade. And Dwight lets him know that they aren't going back.
We're done kneeling!
But kneeling to who? This is all a reference to another character that is part of Dwight's story, the recently cast Negan. He doesn't want to kneel to Negan anymore. If you're wondering how bad a guy Negan is, there is a small clue here when in a moment Wade says he, presumably Negan, only wanted to take this so far.
The only one to ask is willing,
So that's referring to this woman, and it tells you a bit about the role that Negan makes women play in his society. Need to be asked, that's willing. Not a good guy. Oh, and note how they're hiding this character's face, which I think could be for a very specific reason that I'm not gonna go into, but there's actually a really interesting other tidbit here. While the camera is avoiding Wade's face, we're actually seeing things from Daryl's point of view. So the reason we focus on his feet so much is that trackers make it a habit to notice the shoes people are wearing in case they need to sift out their footprints. This guy has some really fancy shoes, but if it were me, I would probably trade them for like a pair of Reeboks or running shoes, but to each their testosterone. Oh, also to note, did you see that after Cam gets a boo-boo, Wade chops off his arm, and then he takes Cam's wristwatch off, making sure not to leave it behind. That's another example of this group caring a lot about the possessions that they've earned. So jumping back over to Abraham's storyline, he comes upon a bunch of phallic symbols, even referring to them as
gentlemen.
And it's a little like, yeah, we get it, Abraham is walking testosterone, but a little bit more important in the scene is him trying to get that RPG launcher off that hanging walker. And look at that, it's another soldier. Except the soldier's uniform before represented Abraham's past life and his potential future life in Alexandria, and this one obviously represents what he'll become if he keeps up the way he has been. Basically a man who's already dead. But when it hits him that this is exactly what Sasha was just talking about, Abraham realizes this is no way to live, and that's why he makes that face that is exactly what I look like when I've had way too much to drink, and he gives up on his pursuit of recklessness. And then just in case Abraham might end up thinking that his reckless decisions are the only things that actually get him anywhere, fate smiles at him and the launcher is left pretty much gift wrapped for him. It's a reminder that it doesn't always have to be about these life or death decisions, and you can't justify always taking it to those extremes, because sometimes, even in a world this shitty, luck still exists. Anyway, after Abraham has made the choice to live a real life and to make real plans for a real future, he basically spills that info to Sasha and kind of surprisingly reveals that he wants her to be a big part of that life. Of course, she's a bit too smart to just jump right into that with the guy that has so recently been so crazy, and she tells him,
You got some stuff to take care of.
now that's probably referring to him getting his mind in order, but also maybe it's a reference to Rosita. You remember Rosita? Yeah, you got some stuff to take care of, Abraham. Oh, and a quick moment you might have missed when she says,
Self-awareness is a beautiful thing.
that's actually her quoting exactly what Bob told her a few seasons ago. So she finally gets herself well enough to tell that to others. As we start to wrap up this episode, we start to really see the costs of the choices people have made. With the runaways realizing that the fire they set to clear this forest from a lot of walkers caused the death of some innocent people that Type Tina used to know.
We did this.
We also see Type Tina paying for the stupid choice of getting too close to dead bodies during a zombie apocalypse. And moments later, we also see Daryl paying for the trust that he put into those people earlier. He did call that decision stupid, but he made it anyway, and now we're seeing the consequences of those choices. But just like Abraham learned earlier, choosing to live, choosing to be a good person, choosing to trust, that doesn't always mean you lose, as fortune smiles upon Daryl too, and he's the one who finds the Patty that the runaways were looking for. Except she's a freaking fuel truck, which after food and water and health is probably the most valuable thing these people can find. And this is a really good moment to point out a big parallel to the journey that Daryl has just endured. In Greek mythology, there's the story of Orpheus, the great musician who's best known for his descent into the fires of hell to try and rescue his recently deceased wife. When he gets there, his music is so good, he actually convinces the gods of the underworld to let him take his wife back with him, but they give him one condition. They tell him as he walks up the steps out of the underworld, his wife is gonna walk right behind him, but he can't look back at her. If he does, he's gonna lose her forever. So he does begin to lead his wife up and out of the underworld, with her following a little bit behind, but just before they reach the exit, he can't help but make sure she's still there behind him. And so he looks back and he does see her, but she immediately fades away, getting sucked back into hell, and he's left alone. Now compare that to this story of Daryl, who at the beginning of this journey encounters a representation of his own death, and it marks his descent into a land associated with only dead things and intense fire. There he encounters people whom he wishes to rescue from this land, wanting to bring them back to the lively world of Alexandria, and just as it seems like he has them rescued, he walks ahead of them, but only when he looks back at them does he lose them forever. And he still makes his way out of hell through the same doorway as before, that dead body. Now that sounds pretty intentional to me, especially considering one of the most famous versions of Orpheus' story was written by the Roman poet Ovid. And that name might sound familiar if you watched my video on the last episode, because as I mentioned there, that quote that Deanna is scrawling on her plans, that's also from a story of Ovid's. We got big Ovid fans on Walking Dead. I'm not hating, keep it up, I love it. Okay, so we're nearing the end just before Daryl picks up the rest of the team, and we see Abraham confirm that his arc is complete. Like Sasha kept telling him earlier, he had two choices, except here it's between the version of the two soldiers he wants to be, and he's picked the one with happiness, the one with a family. Except, did you notice? Abraham removed all the medals that adorned the jacket before. It's not only because Abraham would never embrace the false honor of wearing another man's awards, it also means he knows he's got to earn his own medals and his own awards and his own happiness. As they drive back to Alexandria, we get our closing images, and in contrast to our opening images of the horde behind them and the shitstorm that Abraham had previously wanted to get mixed up in, note how now here, he's looking into that side mirror and he sees that the road is clear. There's nothing following them. He's finally free from his baggage.
Say it again. Help.
Okay, really quick, just 2 lingering thoughts. 1, Abraham was so damn quotable this week, even if he did start to sound a lot more like Eugene than himself. And while I really did enjoy the euphemism he used for his penis, our precious leather, I gotta prefer the great
Loose ends make my ass itch.
because yeah, I agree with you, buddy. Loose ends suck. And 2, it would suck to have diabetes in the apocalypse. Like, especially since apparently this stuff needs to stay cold. That's not gonna happen. Sorry, buddy. Now my question's for you. 1, hooray, Abraham is choosing to live. He wants happiness. He wants a life with Sasha. So is Abraham about to die? 2, does anyone have any ideas why the show might have focused on this soldier's patch? I see that it says airborne and it looks like a crow maybe sitting on a crown. So that makes a lot more sense as a Game of Thrones reference than as a Walking Dead one. So what do you think that means? 3, when Daryl and the 2 runaways are having that intense exchange, we're sorry, you gonna be. Do we think Daryl means because of what he's gonna do to them in the future? Or does he mean that they'll be sorry that they didn't go back with him to Alexandria? See, personally, I think it's the latter because I could see Dwight's betrayal having an ironic twist. Some of you get that. That's it for this week's Walking Dead breakdown. What a freaking doozy. Make sure to watch last week's if you haven't. There's lots of fun stuff in there. And also, I just started doing Flash ones too, and maybe Arrow. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. Check those out though. Hit me up on Twitter at Fimo if you have any questions for me. Follow at New Rockstars to keep up with our video upload schedule. But otherwise, make sure to subscribe so you get the next Walking Dead video. That one's gonna be about season 6, episode 7, called Heads Up. It's supposed to just keep getting more intense until the mid-season finale, which is in like 2 freaking episodes. I've been Philip Molina, and that's it for me. Bye.